Hello, my name is Shari Harrison and I'm a volunteer for Laadli. I work in Silicon Valley as a product manager, which is all about finding and solving problems, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. This presentation is focused on the first 6 steps of the challenge, which is clarifying the problem that you want to solve. Let's first do a quick overview of the steps we'll be talking about. You're going to start by finding a few problems that you think might be good to work on. You will pick one of them and form a clear, concise problem statement. Then you will research your problem, clarify who will benefit from the problem being solved, and investigate the root causes of the problem. When looking for problems to solve, there are a few things you can do. The first is to look at your own life and think about what problems you have or have noticed are common in others. Next, you can listen and interview people around you. What do people complain about to each other? And finally, you can read the newspaper or research on the internet what's happening in your area that you might be able to impact. For now, don't worry about how many you have. More is better. Challenge yourself to come up with 5 or even 10. Once you have your list, take a look and narrow it down to 3 just based on your gut to write it down on your challenge worksheet. I'm going to take a minute to talk about how to interview because interviewing is something you're going to do in a few different steps in the process. So let's take a minute to talk about how to do it well. The first tip is to use open-ended questions. These are questions that can't be answered with yes or no. You want instead to focus on questions that start with what, why, or how. So for example, if instead of saying something like, do you think this is a problem in our community? You could say, what impact does this problem have on your life? Or what impact does this problem have on our community? It's a more open-ended question and you'll get more information. The second tip is to have them do more of the talking than you are. If they stall and don't really know what else to say, try asking for more information with something like, oh, that's interesting. What else comes to mind about that? Or can you tell me more? The third tip is to confirm your understanding. Make sure that you're understanding of their perspective instead of assuming it is the same as your own. Ask them if you have it right by repeating it back to them. The fourth tip is to take notes. Now, while they're speaking, stay focused on what they're saying, but then when they pause, take a moment to write down what's important before you ask your next question. And the final tip is that it's good to do it 1 or 2 at a time. 1, for obvious reasons, you can focus on them, and sometimes having 2 will help you see where people's experiences are the same or different, both of which can help you. To decide which problem to work on, you are looking for the problem that is most interesting to you and important to others, so the intersection. You can use some of the interview techniques we just talked about to discover which problem resonates with others the most, and you should already know what's most interesting to you. Now that you have the idea for what problem you want to solve, the next few steps will be refining the problem. This is critical because the better your problem statement, the more potential impact you can have. Most people, when working on a problem, they jump really quickly to solutions and they don't really spend time on their problem. I think you can really set yourself apart in this challenge by having a great problem statement. It's also important to expect it to change as you go through the next steps. Try and make it better and better in each step and don't rush through them. So the first thing to think about when you're writing down your problem statement is to make sure you're stating the problem as a problem as opposed to a solution in disguise, and also to make sure that the scope is a good scope. So this is an example of a problem that is a solution in disguise. Teenagers should connect to each other so they don't get depressed. That's really saying that you think that the whole reason teenagers get depressed are because they don't connect with each other, and therefore you're telling them they should do something different as a solution. Instead, try something like teen depression is on the rise. You also want to make sure the problem is a size that is challenging but not too challenging. You don't want it to be too small, like teen depression is on the rise in my friend group, but you also don't want it to be too big. Teen depression is on the rise all over the world. Look for somewhere in between, like teen depression is on the rise in my community. So now you have a really great draft of your problem statement. Step 3 is simply to write it down. That's the fastest step you're going to get. And then on to doing some research. This is another area where you can really set yourself apart. Your goal in doing research is to understand the problem better. You can do this by reading about the problem, interviewing people, watching people, and you can even do surveys to see how people feel about the problem and what they think the root cause of the problem is. When researching, look for relevant statistics. For example, how do you know that teen depression is on the rise? What are the statistics from 10 years ago, from 20 years ago? What are they now? You also want to think about what has been tried already. This is priming you for your solution. And also see if you can find any experts, ideally locally in your community. For people to interview and observe, there's kind of 3 different categories of people you should think about doing this with. Reach out to experts and hopefully interview them. Interview and observe beneficiaries, and also interview and possibly observe and give surveys to any other people that are related to the problem or your ideas, early ideas for your solution. Surveys can be very useful to gather data to make your case or figure out preferred solutions. You should try and get as many responses as possible to make sure that your data is valid. You can use different types of questions. You can use multiple choice. You can use free form, just where they can just write in their answer. It's very common to use something called a Likert scale, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you think this impacts you? Some example survey questions. How often do you feel depressed? This would be a scale, never being 0, maybe all the time being 5. When you feel depressed, what do you think causes it? That's a multiple choice question. Too much homework, social media, my parents, all of the above. Maybe you want to have an other, and they can fill in the blank of what they think causes their depression. Now that you've done your research, it's time to think a little bit more about who exactly is going to benefit from this. For example, teenage girls in my community, pregnant women in poor neighborhoods, high school girls at my school. You want to be pretty clear about their age, their gender, their economic status, where they live. And you also might want to think about other people that benefit. For example, if you're addressing teen depression, the people in the teenage girls or the teenagers' families are going to be beneficiaries as well. Step 6 is the last step in problem formation, and it is to do what's called root cause analysis. Here is where you separate out the symptoms of the problem, which tend to be why you want to fix it, from what is actually causing the problem. Identifying root causes will help you form solutions later, and you can figure them out through your research. So here are some example symptoms, staying focused on our teenage depression example. Teenagers are eating too much or too little, they're doing badly in school, they're getting mad at their friends. These are all reasons why you want to fix it. They're all symptoms of the problem. And you might find in your research or your surveys that some of the root causes are school pressure, parental pressure, feeling alone, not enough friends, etc. So these are root causes, why the things are happening. So kind of returning to our wheel, like I said before, the hardest and most important part of this process is problem statement formation. So once you have done all this work, you've done your interviews, you've figured out your root cause, you figured out who it benefits, you might want to do one final adjustment to your problem statement. For example, you may have started in step 3 with teenage depression is on the rise in my community, which is a great problem statement. But you might want to add in the root cause. Teenagers in my community are experiencing more depression because of social media or because of school pressure. And that concludes our first workshop. That is the problem statement. Thanks so much for your time.